It reminds me of on the whiteboard.
Let's talk real quick about Kepler.
Is it possible that that can be turned against them?
To build on your theory, and maybe a cautionary tale, is that today Sterling and I are talking about the hit TV show Pluribus, Episode 8, Charm Offensive.
So spoilers are ahead.
We are examining the relationship between Carol and Zosia,
getting into all the cool details we finally got about the others and how they work,
catching up with our boy Manousos and where he is at on his journey,
and getting into an interesting theory about how Carol can unjoin the others.
And next we are tackling a wine-based drama, Drops of God Season 2, so we look forward to having you guys for our next show.
All right, let's get into the episode. Let's jump in with Carol and Zosia and their kind of first interactions back together and how that made you feel. What do you think about this?
Well, I'm instantly seeing Carol be much nicer to Zosia. It's kind of like night and day, you know, she's worried about, but like also still awkward, right? Like she still kind of like doesn't really know how to interact with her. They've had this long break between each other, and now she's like, I don't really know what to talk about, but she's like, don't worry about like moving stuff. Is my lemonade good enough? Like she's very like concerned about how Zosia is viewing their interaction.
Yeah, I think it's got to be this like really weird situation that's going on. Carol still hasn't apologized for anything, I don't think. Did she? She didn't.
I don't think so. I don't feel like she said sorry about anything.
And it's possible that she believes that to some extent, like these actions were justified, that she feels like she is the only person in the entire world that is really trying to fix things. And so, you know, I do think that she feels personal responsibility to a certain extent. She does feel a connection with the person she sees in front of her. There are kind of feelings there. I think she is realizing that regardless of if she wants them in her life or not, that they are the only option, and that she can't go without kind of human touch and like human interaction. Yeah. And so it's this weird, complex thing. And so you can feel the awkwardness of just like not, it kind of gave like first date vibes, you know, where like you don't, especially with like the lemonade, where she's like, you know, oh, is it too sweet? You know, where you're trying so hard to impress and you don't know how to start the conversation and you want it to go right. But at the same time, it's like, it's so awkward. Like, is it going right? You know?
Yeah, but also it's like so hard, you know, after everything they've kind of gone through, there's, you know, it's been about, I think it's somewhere between 40 and 60 days at this point. And just like the awkwardness between them, it's like, you know, if you get like in a fight with a partner or something and you're like trying to make up, and it's like, I know we're kind of made up, but we don't really know how to interact. And like Carol even says like she doesn't know what to say. And, you know, Zosia being so sweet, the joined, is like, oh, you know, we don't have to talk. We can play a board game, which I've mentioned before. You can't play board games anymore. But there is this, the joined can't play board games with themselves, but in a way they still can play board games. Just they have to play with somebody that's not joined. But even still, there's some things like chess that they can't play because, like, they're every grandmaster of chess and can't play bananagrams. And so you have to almost play something that's a little bit more luck-driven and not more, like, skill-driven. Like Monopoly, rolling dice.
Maybe, but there was an interesting point. You know, when they're playing Spit, Carol asks if Zosia was letting her win. And Zosia did, you know, once again, like the artful dodge that they're so good at doing, where they don't answer the question and they distract you with something else. And it was like a slightly flirty answer. She says something like, you know, oh, you're going to have to keep playing to find out. And this is part of like what we'll see later, where it's like they're trying to take all of her time. They're trying to create these distractions and like hold on to her attention. And this is one of them. And I think that you can be somebody that's truthful. You can be somebody who doesn't lie, and you could still throw a game. That's different from telling the truth. And like we have seen the like, you know, the links that they will go to like put on these airs. Like they can act, they can pretend to, you know, to be in certain situations. And so they could be pulling from their knowledge of like, you know, how have people lost this game in the past? Like, what can I do to be like just a step behind? You know, what are the moves that players that have lost chess have done? You know, like, yes, I know all the best strategies, but also I could pull from every strategy that has like lost the game.
True. I do see that they could intentionally throw games, but I do think it would be better to play games that like have a little bit more chance in them, like rolling the dice. Where does your, you know, person go? And so like those games would be a little bit more enjoyable, where there is actually like, how do we play this game together versus like something that's very skill based. That's like, because I do feel like you can pick up when people are not playing as hard as can.
She would know that if they're playing chess, if they're playing bananagrams, and Zosia lost, she would know for a fact that Zosia threw it. In that case, the theater of it would be gone, because you can't like pretend that you don't know that they, you know, like every grandmaster is sitting in front of you. If you lose this game of chess, then you threw it.
Right. And I do think, you know, a little bit like with the croquet game that they were doing, there is this little bit of like still that mystery that you were mentioning of, do they have the muscle memory? Like it's muscle memory at a point, but like if you share all of the knowledge, then like you could have the muscle memory in any body basically.
Right.
I did love a little bit that we got a little bit more of the joined kind of like giving Carol a little bit of a hard time, you know, kind of picking on her a little bit. And I think that kind of like, in a way, for me, humanized the joined a little bit, right? Like they're not so robotic of like, yes, Carol, we're going to please you. I'm going to tell you everything you want to hear. And maybe that is part of like what they think Carol wants to hear, is that they can kind of pick on her a little bit and be like, you suck, Carol. You're not good at this game. And you know, whether it's them still trying to manipulate Carol, I do think it did create this little like humanization of them.
Yeah, I think it's this strategy that they have where they're figuring out. The thing with like connecting with people is that people are different, and so you can't treat every person the same way. If you do, you're not going to create that connection. Some people are going to want something more like Kumba Diabate, where they want you to like to cater after their every whim and make them feel like royalty. That's the dream they want. Versus like for somebody like Carol, who is so kind of jaded about the world, when she sees something that's perfect, like we'll get to it later, but like with the diner, you know, where when she sees that something is perfect, instead of being like, oh man, this is the best, she's like, no, this is wrong. Things can't be perfect. And so like, I think that they're figuring out how to connect with Carol. And it's like, you can't be too nice and too pleasing with her. Like, yes, you can banter, you can create a connection, but it has to be a specific type of connection with her.
Yeah. Cause Carol ultimately just wants like a feeling of normalcy. You know, she mentions it with the pronouns, like just say I, like don't say we. We're gonna have breakfast together, like you're gonna eat too, right? Like you're not gonna just drink your little HDP. I feel like she's just looking for a little sense of like normalcy in this like very weird world. She just wants to like, hey, we're hanging out, we're getting massages together, you know, like very.
But it's interesting in finally getting this connection, you know, and like when Carol follows Zosia to find out where they sleep. This is like the first time that Carol is really learning about the others.
Yes.
You know, this is a big bridge. And I think that this connection that she finally had with Zosia that made her, I think, much more empathetic to Zosia and what she's going through, also kind of opened her eyes to the idea of like, you you have to play nice. If I want something from them, and she clearly still does, she wants information, the way to do that will be through a positive relationship. And that finally opened doors. And it was so wild seeing, we talked about much earlier, I think like the first episode, we talked about the fact that they don't have homes. Like there are no more possessions, like personal possessions. And so it's not a your home, my home. But I think I theorized something like, wherever, but at the end of the day, wherever they're closest to, that's going to be their home. But I didn't also calculate the like energy consumption and the fact that they would want to congregate so that they can mitigate their energy consumption. And that was just like taking it 2 steps further. And that's just so interesting seeing that.
Yeah, so not only did Carol start learning about the join more, but I feel like the audience gets to learn a little bit more. And we see, it seems like there's the guy taking off his clothes and putting it in a big dumpster thing where somebody's probably going to take all those clothes and wash them and do like, large loads. And maybe they have industrial washers that they'll use to do that. So they're not always, running each individual washer and dryer. There's all these things of like, how can they be as efficient as possible? They have all the beds there, and interestingly, some more that we got from the audience, which also Carol picked up on, is that yes, they're all sleeping together in these rooms, but they also still touch each other. I don't know if you noticed that like,
yes,
a lot of like, so Carol had her arm on Zosia as she slept next to her, but there were a couple like other groups that were cuddled in like groups of 3 and groups of 4. And part of that makes me feel like there is still this human aspect to them where, as primates mentioned before, that we like touch. And so we like that social connection. So like, even though they're connected mentally, they still require a little bit more touch. And I've even commented about like how, like ant-like they are sometimes, where they just like walk in rows. But this also kind of gives me a little bit different perspective that they do want a little bit more than just like work and business. It's like there is something more. And like they crave, like when she gets excited about, we can go in this a little bit deeper, but they want to read something new because they can't produce anything new, but they want to like read something that Carol can come up with because they're thirsting for something that they haven't read before.
Right. It's interesting your take on the touching. So I didn't notice the touching at first. Dawn was the one who pointed it out to me, and she kind of asked like, what do you think about this? And my take was a little bit different. I was thinking that it was much closer to the same idea as like being in the stadium, where the idea behind that is that if they're in one place, they can only run one air conditioning heating system instead of multiple ones. But also what I was thinking is that if they are touching like this, that they can use their body heat in place of keeping the temperature at a certain level. So they can actually have it a little bit cooler in the place than what would be comfortable and let their body heat kind of take up that. But I could see it being that there is still a core human need for touch.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, that kind of goes back to Vince Gilligan and the fact that so much of the storytelling is visual instead of being told, that it does leave these like gaps in information that we may never know some things. Although this episode gave us so much information. I think this was like one of the biggest information overloads that we got compared to all of the other ones. There's a question that we literally got asked in our live episode that we just did, which is what happened to the animals?
Right.
We said that we assumed that they kind of like gave them up, but I don't know why I didn't. Once again, you have to take it one step further.
Right.
And what are the implications of that? And I didn't think of, what about the ones that are like fiercely loyal and just never will leave their owner's side.
And I'm sure that there's a ton of those. Like, I know this was the first time we got to see it, but we're also seeing from Carol's perspective where she's been very sheltered from them and like isolated from them. But now like we get one group and then there's like a dog here. And like a question we had early on is like, do the dogs get changed? And I think that like Sosia's reaction to the dog, like they know that it's loyal and they're like, you're free, but like if you want to hang out, you can hang out. And she like even refers to him as a good boy. Like he's such a sweet dog. And it's like, there is this, they could look at that dog and just be like, oh, he just wants to follow his master. He can hang out and like, that's fine. And we'll feed him and whatever. But like, it did seem like there was a little bit like an empathetic care of that dog. Like he's a good boy. We like him. He's particular about his owner and, you know, he waves and I'm sure they enjoy the dog's company in a way.
And it could be that they believe that you shouldn't cage animals, you shouldn't claim them as your own, and so they want to give the animals the opportunity to do what the animals want. And if what the animal chooses is to be with you, then they will honor that wish and they will, you know, take care of that animal at that point. But that's because like the animal made that choice and the animal made it clear, I'm looking for a relationship.
It's a little bit of a parallel with Carol in a way of like, if she is this pet, right? Like they kind of were like, okay, you don't want us, so we'll all leave and you can kind of do your own thing. And then when Carol finally, you know, wants them back, then they're like, okay, we'll be here. Like, you know, they want to please all the unjoined. It seems like the animals, Carol. And so like, there is this little similarity between Carol and like a pet where it's like, okay, well, if you do want us, we'll be here. And if like, same with the dog. If you want to be with us, we'll let you be with us. Like, we're not going to kick you out. So it does seem like that's kind of like, they do kind of have this like kindness to them, weirdly. Like, yeah, they might be trying to distract Carol, but there is, I don't know, it does feel like they maybe is not as nefarious as thought of before.
I've mostly been saying that the whole time. I do always have that, like, certain things just look nefarious. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard not to think what kind of ulterior motives do they have here. But they are working so hard to take care of the earth, to take care of the remaining people on the earth, to take care, you know, that I do think that there is goodness in those actions and that they believe that they are doing the right thing, you know, that it's not that they have some kind of weird secret plan, although they have held some things back until press, like the fact that they are trying to turn them. But even that, they do feel that they are doing for good reasons. I thought something really interesting this episode was, you know, once we kind of move past the stadium and Carol finally realizes, hey, I can get information from them if I just play nice. There is this interesting dance. There is between, you know, the others and Carol, or between Zosia and Carol. And it kind of is like a chess game, or it kind of is like a game of cat and mouse, or two nations trying to get information on each other and pretending not to be doing it. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you have Carol on one side, who is for once putting on this air of being nice and being playful and kind of flirty to a certain extent, but her goal is to get information. And then you have, you know, Zosia and the others on the other side who are putting on all of these big airs. And it does seem genuine, that it's coming from a place of genuine love. And I do still think it is, but there is also another thing behind it, that they're trying to distract her. You know, two things can be true. And I think that I do think they genuinely do care about Carol, but I do also think they are genuinely trying to take her time as a resource.
Right. So like also flipping that back on Carol, like two things can be true. Like I think that she does want to change humanity back because she knows they're going to starve. You know, she knows that this isn't right, that this is kind of like a very weird thing. But I do think that she does have a little bit more care and like for them. Like, she even says it, like when she like calls Zosia out to her face, she's like, I like you guys. Like, I do like you guys, but this is like so weird. And like, I can't like not do everything in my power to like change this, but like I do think that Carol has a new appreciation and affection towards the join, but also knows that it's very unnatural and needs to get it back. So it does feel like both Carol and the joined have like both of these goals where they want to please each other, but they also want different outcomes. Like the joined want to keep being joined and spreading the join, with an antenna to send out the radio. But like Carol also is like, I want to turn you back. And it doesn't even feel like either of them are wrong or bad, but it does feel very like they just have competing odds or like competing interests.
Yeah. And you do see this kind of build, but it is very much like a relationship in its infancy. Once again, two things can be true. And I think in this side, they both are putting on airs. They're both putting on a certain image of who they think the others want to see. Just like a relationship, like you don't generally show your true self in the beginning, so you try and put on your best clothes, you try and act your best. You don't want to share all of your darkest secrets because you don't want to scare them away. So you try and put on like the best facade. And that's what I see both sides doing with each other, where, Carol is playing nice. She's doing what she needs to keep that connection. But it was so interesting when she went back to the house that like the first thing that she wrote is, they eat people, underline.
Yeah.
So it shows that other side where she might like them. She might make this like relationship work between them, but she still has this other drive, this true side of her, that is like, I don't care what, I'm driven and I'm going to fix this. And you see the same side with the other side, where it's like they're putting on their best airs to kind of court her. Yeah,
definitely. I do feel, but like I also feel like they know that Carol's never going to change her resolve. And I think, Zosia says that. She's like, I know you will. We wish you would stop because, we are happy this way. But like, we know you're not gonna. So like, I don't know. They still want to make Carol happy, even though they know that she's doing everything in her power to like wanting to take them back.
But here's the thing. So they have, 7 billion people, and they only need well, I guess they use definitely more than one person. They only need a town's worth of people, to court Carol.
Mm-hmm.
They've got the background actors. They have the people that, need to grab stuff that Carol wants, like markers, people to clean things up and keep things tidy around the area for her. So they only need like a town's worth of people, which is a drop in the water compared to, 7 billion. And the other 7 billion can focus on the antenna, and they can focus on trying to change the remaining people.
Mm-hmm.
If they can beat her to the punch, then they're, if they can turn her before she can figure out how to turn them back, then their goal ends up kind of being victorious. And the easiest way they can do that is because they can dedicate people to do things while they're also courting her. The biggest thing that they can do is to take up her time. It's like they're running out the clock, if you will.
Right. That is a good point. But it is interesting because it's like, it does seem like, maybe they are running out the clock. Maybe they're showing this feigned interest in her writing Waikaro because they're like, oh, if you're spending time writing Waikaro, you're not going to be actively trying to stop us. But it does feel like they genuinely are interested in the book. Like they want something new read. They like her writing. There's people that love the Waikaru books. And so getting that new version of it is something they're excited about.
Yeah. Once again, like two things can be true. They can also still get something from this, but at every play, you know, they're doing, and sorry, football fans, I'm not a football dude, but I do know that I do know that like there are certain things that you can do that like don't stop the clock, you know? So like at every play, if you aim for whatever it is that like keeps that running, you know, you keep the game going, the clock isn't stopped. And so it's like, it feels like that's what they're doing at every move, is like, what can we do to just take up a little bit more of her time? Because there's only so much time before we figure out how to turn her. If we take up her time up until then, so she can't figure out how to turn us, then we're good. We win the game. So it's like, and they can, I'm sure that people in football, you know, they change teams occasionally. So it's like I'm sure that they're friends with some of the people on the other side, you know, that they don't have to hate them to want to beat them.
Right.
You know, and so like, I think that's kind of what it is. They can still get enjoyment out of it. They can still get something from this.
But like, okay, this is also, so in a weird way, they create this diner, right? And it's to like bring this version of Carol, because like in a way that was like when Carol was the most happy, right? Like when she was writing in this diner and she had not a care in the world, and so they like built, like take a lot of time, energy, resources, bringing people out that were in Florida to create this moment for Carol that was like her best time. And then shortly after, you know, Carol feels very weird about it, right? She's like, this is abnormal. You ruined this. You brought this girl all the way over here to like do this play acting thing. And it just feels like you're manipulating me. Like she even says, you are manipulating me. This is like, you're trying to get me to like stop. But it does feel like this is like the best version of Carol, like in a weird way. Like she is excited to write again. She is able to write more freely and make Raban a woman that had how she always wanted it to be. And so in this, yes, they might be trying to manipulate her, but they're also, we've seen Carol be this like grumpy curmudgeon from the beginning, even when she was with Helen. And now she is this like softer person that is enjoying life again, it seems. And so is that necessarily bad? I don't know.
But once again, and I alluded to this earlier, is that, you know, Carol is the type of person that when things are too good, she starts looking for the exit, or she starts looking for the problem. I think she's had some terrible traumas in her life. And I think that she's put up these walls as protection, that this negativity, this like curmudgeon-y aspect of her character, it's a way of self-preservation. And I think she saw that things were too perfect. And that triggered that moment to look around and realize, what are you guys doing? This huge production is just to take my time. That was the big realization, because I think the train horn in the distance, you know, that was just kind of like a cute flirty moment. They're talking. She mentions the train horn. Zosia mentally communicates, and somebody on the train, you know, plays the horn. But that wasn't like a big production for Carol. That was like an organic moment, you know, that came out. Versus like this is coordinated. This is the charm offensive, the coordinated attack, you know, on her interest to like take her time. And it was wild what they did. Like, did you see all the cars in the background?
Yeah. And
there's
weirdly, there were, but this was in the beginning. There were planes. There were several planes in the sky. But to me, that was just them coming back, because that was when she was asking, is everybody back yet?
Yeah.
And so that was probably them bringing in people and resources on the planes. But yes, I did see all the cars driving in the background, and I couldn't tell if it was like the cars in the background were to create this normalcy for Carol,
It's
or if they were
ambiance,
actually doing something. Because when she does get up and leave, the cars stop in the back.
Stop.
Instantly.
It was ambiance. It was just like the people at the bar that are talking. What kind of conversation can they be having? They're both sides of the conversation. They know what is not just what is about to be said, but what that person is thinking. Like everything it's an act. The cars just add to the ambiance, and I think this is kind of like with Kumba Diabate. They were trying to employ what they did with him, where they're trying to like completely immerse her in order to pull her in. But with her, it has the opposite effect, where she realizes, instead of having fun with this kind of like playtime, instead, that actually is the type of thing that like rips her out of the moment. And she realizes, like when it's just her and Zosia, she can believe that's real. But when it's this huge production, especially, she realizes this place burned down. You built this for me. You dragged this woman all the way from Miami to come here. She left her husband. Not that anybody cares about them anymore, but like all of that just to what? To take my time, to distract me.
Or is it like they know that she's always going to work on it? Is it to distract? Because even early on, Zosia was like, oh, you're writing again. And if they know that she's working on plans to fix this, and she's just like, take your time, like we'll get out of your hair. We'll let you, have a good time writing. Like they did kind of remove themselves. Like we're saying, the same thing can be true, but like it does feel like that might not have necessarily been to just waste her time, but to help her kind of like get back to like a part where she, like a version of herself that she liked more, a version of herself that she was when she was happier. Like if they ultimately just want to make Carol happy, I could see that them creating this elaborate diner when she was at her happiest is not necessarily to waste her time. Because like they acknowledge, they're like, yeah, we know you're still working on it and we wish you wouldn't, but we know it's going to happen. Like they can run out her time. And like we see moments where they're spending time with her, but like at any time Carol could be like, okay, I'm going to spend a day by myself and work on this. And they'll allow it, and it did feel more, it could be, maybe they're running out the clock, but also maybe they just want a better version of Carol. Maybe they are good people.
I do think they are good. And it also does change my perspective on Kumba Diabate potentially, because I do wonder. So, initially I assumed that Kumba was the one that asked for all of these ridiculous things, and that he was the one who said, hey, let's play Casino Royale and do this like elaborate thing. But Carol didn't ask for the diner. They used knowledge of people in Carol's life that had the memories of her best moments, and they created that and brought her to that world. Who is to say the others didn't do the same with Kumba and didn't at least like hint at, hey, you've always wanted to go to Vegas. Yeah. What if we do that? And then they created these elaborate scenarios.
Yes, I could see that, but it did seem like when they dropped the act, they were excited for him to win. He's like, no, like, come on. You're supposed to be upset that you lost. Like, I need you to do that. Like, so it does feel like, yes, maybe they kind of pointed him. They're like, oh, we can do this, we can do that. Like, we're happy to create these scenarios for you. But ultimately, it does feel like he orchestrated those a little bit more just because he wanted them to stay in character a little bit more, where you think that if they were putting this on for him, they would stay in character the whole time throughout the thing. And maybe they're learning how to stay in character better to appease the non-join. And that's how we see like the waitress come by and is like, oh, let me top you off.
I know that the timing of that was so weird, where it kind of feels like breaking the fourth wall to a certain extent. The fact that Carol just mentioned this and then we see her makes it feel like that kind of would break the reality of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe that points to the fact that they don't have this system down perfect. Creating perfect fantasies that pull people in is a very tough thing, especially since it comes down to, once again, like an individual level. You have to understand the individual perfectly in order to figure out how to tailor something that doesn't pull them out of the moment.
Yeah.
We learned a lot of really interesting things this episode.
We sure did. We have a better understanding of how the join feel things and how they can interact with each other, and how Zosia can enjoy a massage even though they are massaging themselves.
Right.
I love that we heard about the guy that got impaled, and that the one thing that Zosia says, that if we could feel everything at the same time, it would be unbearable. And I think that this was such a huge insight to like the joined as a whole. Yes.
So like they take in the information, but they don't necessarily take in the feelings of that individual. And I think that potentially points to why Carol's directed anger can still work against them, because that anger is directed at all 7 billion of them. Mm-hmm. So if they all get the information of she hates all of us and this strong, it doesn't matter how that one person felt. They all are able to react to that feeling all at once. And that's unbearable. That like overloads the system. It's kind of like it's like a DDoS attack, in software, when you have a bunch of people, or it can be a program that's able to run a number of times, that all accesses a system and overloads the back end, because there is a limit to the amount of information that can be retrieved at any given time. And so if you have too many people hitting a system all at once, it can actually temporarily break that system. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what those like directed hatred towards the others is, like a DDoS attack, where it hits, unlike the feelings, which are individual, that understanding that like somebody hates all of us, that knowledge hits all of them at once.
Yeah.
And disrupts the system.
So what do you think about like when Zosia when she was in cardiac arrest and they were all around Zosia and Carol crying? It doesn't feel like they were all feeling that. Or were they just worried about Zosia? Were they worried potentially about, because it didn't seem like, Zosia talks about like in the last 10 minutes, there's been this many deaths, this many births, but it's not like they all seem upset about those people that died, right? Like it wasn't like a permanent moment where they were upset, where with Zosia having a cardiac arrest, everybody around her was crying and like everybody was upset. It felt like they felt pain. Like, what do you think that was?
Maybe it was that this was one that they could fix, that they could, prevent this death. Mm. If not for the fact that it is incompatible with, with Carol's want of don't come near me. So like with the person that is impaled on the fence, no vital organs were pierced, but, it is possible that if nobody goes to him and patches it up, that he bleeds to death or gets like an infection or something along those lines and ends up succumbing from those wounds. But they can come to that, they can fix that, versus this is one where technically they could, if not for the fact that it conflicts with their morals of making everybody happy, and, you know, Carol's want goes against that.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. Another thing that we learned that might be confirmed is they communicate electromagnets like a radio signal,
like a radio signal,
like that radio signal that Manousos found. Just saying.
So I think that means that can be at least temporarily disrupted, stopped, maybe. Also, maybe, so this is it's illegal to do, so I don't recommend that anybody does this. But if governments are gone and you're trying to save the world, then maybe you don't worry about illegal things. You can also jam a signal, you know, by kind of overloading it. So it's possible that they can transmit something, noise on that same frequency that can at least disrupt the area that is close enough to that kind of disruption. So there is the possibility that they can. Now, I don't think that like breaks the connection, just like a jammer doesn't break the source of the signal. You know, if you stop the jammer, then the signal continues to get received wherever. So it's not a permanent fix, but I do think that could be a temporary fix until there is a bigger solution.
Yes, I definitely agree. And well, let's put a pin in that. Let's talk real quick about Kepler.
Okay. I don't think that the original source of this is from Kepler 22b. This is something I've been kicking around for quite some time. I actually had thoughts like these that I shared, and I think this episode kind of confirmed it. You know, that they might want to spread to other planets and that we'll like probably never find out. You know, we'll never meet the aliens that created this. That it's too far away. I think that the planet that sent this to us is just in a long chain of planets, you know, that wasn't the first one. The one before that wasn't the first one. And I even want to take it kind of a step further, which is that there might not have been that original progenitor, you know, that original creator of the DNA sequence. And that it's possible, like, imagine there are things like this RNA sequence that exist. Obviously, not things that connect us psychically, but there are things like this that enter a body and insert DNA into the host, and then they replicate with the host. So unlike what we think of as like traditional viruses, which like a traditional virus will enter a host cell, and they'll force that host cell to replicate it. And there are so many replications of that virus that the host cell bursts and the host cell dies. And that's what like causes so much issue in the body, is like a lot of the individual cells in the body are getting destroyed.
Right.
Versus in this case, it's like it's inserting a little piece of DNA and becoming part of the host. And every time that host cell replicates, that little piece of DNA is also replicated. You know, so it's passive and it's not destructive, and things like that exist. And if you think about like the size of the universe and the fact that there are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on every beach and every ocean floor in the entire world, that's an unimaginable number. And so you realize that there have to be so many habitable planets around that. And so the chance for life is unfathomable. And if on one of these worlds, I imagine that there might be something similar to this RNA sequence that eventually evolved, and that given enough time, that on one of these planets, one of these things would have evolved two new traits. And like one of those traits is a trait that connects the hosts that have that little bit of DNA which would further that civilization, because like that civilization would be able to work as one and be able to do like great things with one mind. And then the second thing being this desire, this need, you know, that they like can't repress to spread.
Yeah.
And so it might have just developed on its own. And then as a natural course, like once, you know, everything on that planet was infected, their next thing would be like, we have to get this to other worlds.
I mean, yeah, I feel like that is a very reasonable theory. Again, we probably will never know. But one thing that I find interesting about the Kepler-2 is...
Kepler-22.
22, that's what I meant to say.
And so Kepler-22 is the sun, or is the star.
Yeah.
And then Kepler-22b is the planet. It's more Venus-like than it is Earth-like.
Well, and so this is, to build on your theory, and maybe a cautionary tale, is that, you know, this sequence goes and it eventually destroys its host until it gets that signal out, right? And this planet is covered in water. So did the inhabitants of that planet, which if they were trying to create this radio signal, how were they surviving on a planet that is basically all water? Or did the water eventually, because of how this host was replicating or actions that it might have taken, create an incidental flood? Like they're trying to cool the antenna that is broadcasting this, and eventually everybody on that planet succumbed to the virus because they had this one goal to like broadcast this thing, and then that planet just dies and maybe is overtaken by water in some way. They tried to, you know, create maybe weather effects to like cool this antenna that takes a lot of energy, and it ends up flooding the whole planet, and everybody is gone on that planet. And that could be something that happens to the future of these join people, is that they get the antenna going, and it causes a disruption in one way that ultimately they're not worried about starving because they're going to kill themselves anyway.
I mean, you know, like many viruses, like the host doesn't have to survive a virus, as long as the host is able to spread the virus before the host dies, or enough of the hosts are able to spread the virus before the hosts die, then it can continue. And so that very much is a possibility. Although I was thinking that it was like, why can't they be water beings? Why can't this be like Avatar 2 water boogaloo, you know?
Well, and then the argument would be that how are you, because if you're having a radio transmitter, you would assume there'd be some type of electricity that is broadcasting this. And typically electricity and water don't mix. So to me, this could also make the argument of why it is important for Carol to change them back, because if they are going to, like further in the seasons, like if it's going to be something that is destructive, that wipes them out, there is a reason to be like, we need to change you back because like you guys are inevitably going to kill yourselves. And I think that could be very compelling. And then potentially she could try and like get some of the joined on their side. Like, you're on a fool's errand. You are going to end your civilization. And at the end of the day, like, you might get this broadcast out to share this love, this thing that you're grateful for, but it also could be your downfall.
Right. It's so interesting seeing that they know that they are starving to death, yet they have love for the ones that sent the signal to us, and they want to pay it forward to the next civilization.
We want you to starve to death.
Yeah, they think it's so much better this way than the alternative, and it's like such an inborn drive. It's just it's crazy kind of seeing that. And I love, so like after we learn all this, after the trip to Lachlan's, I think that's a kind of a pivotal moment for Carol, because I think that's when she realizes the theater, and not that Zosia can't necessarily like her, but that there is something else going on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she starts this demand of, why can't you say I? How hard is that?
Yeah, and she wants that normalcy. But in a weird way, like when they're making breakfast, she's able to ask Zosia, like, what's your favorite? Like, she does drop it a little bit because she's like, do you like omelets? And then Zosia says, yeah, we like omelets. And she's like, wait, like you, lowercase you, do you like omelets? Like, what is your favorite food? And we get this like nice touching moment about Zosia, who has a memory that is specific to her and like her favorite ice cream and not just, or her favorite food and not just what does the joined like, or what do they care about? Like specifically focused on the individual. And I think that Zosia hasn't really been that way with Carol. And this is another way that like Carol is kind of getting the join to drop their guard a little bit and be a little bit more, open with her.
Because there was an interesting thing about that, the ice cream part, was that when Carol was pushing her to access her specific memory, up until that point, saying I or me was difficult. We even saw that with the chapter when Carol gives her the chapter and, asks about it. And Zosia says, Carol, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But she starts saying we, because it's never natural. And when Carol asks her to like access her personal memory, you see that Zosia has to pause to do it. But once she's in there, once she's in Zosia, she started saying I and me, like very flowing.
Yeah, and because even right before that with the omelet, she was saying, we love omelets. We love all breakfast food, which was, she's already been corrected to like keep the pronoun correct. And so the fact that she was like, we love that, but then in that memory,
what is your favorite food?
Yes.
And so that has to access that. I do wonder, I originally kind of wondered how it is that individuality was lost. And, I did wonder if it was possible that it was something kind of nefarious, like the individual is buried underneath of all of the others. But if there is no intent, then there is nothing nefarious. Like if it is a DNA sequence that changed them, and it's not a person, it's not like a plan that was put in place, it's not, something with like ulterior motives, and instead is just, there's so many inputs coming in that aren't you, that it's hard to focus on you, and you can see through everybody's else's eyes, so it's hard to see through your eyes. I wonder whether or not it's less that they are buried like on purpose, and more like they are lost. Like it's hard for them to see and define themselves with all the constant inputs coming in from 7 billion other people.
Yeah, I mean, that totally makes sense.
Even when Carol pressed for an individual memory, it wasn't in the past. It wasn't Zosia's memory. It was the one reader of of the Waikaro books that loves Raban. And so Zosia is accessing this one memory that's not hers, but this one time that she's finally accessing her memory, that she's finally seeing herself and her own thoughts. It felt like it kind of almost awakened something.
Yeah, or almost like pulled her out of it. And I do think that maybe
just a little bit.
Okay, and now I think let's get into my man Manousos, because I think
let's do it.
This is all connected in a way, and something I had put in a pin earlier, right?
Yes.
Like, so there is this knowledge that Manousos, he goes back to that one radio signal, right? And so he has that percolating in his head. Carol knows that they communicate kind of like a radio signal, so that's how they could work together. potentially. And if they are able to find a way to jam that signal, maybe pulling somebody out like Zosia is having her access these memories while that blockade is up and can almost like pull her out of the hive mind while everything is jammed and creates this blocked dynamic. That is all if Manousos and Carol can find common ground, because I do think...
I worry about that.
I don't think that they're on the same page as much anymore, especially with how Carol does seem to have more care for the joined, where Manousos is very, very still untrusting. And I don't know if they can work together because he believes that there's no redeeming them, that they are just their own thing. They can't redeem them. They're unnatural. Maybe we can reverse this, but like, there's no redemption in the joined as they are currently. And Carol does see that there is some like benefit to them. There is like, she does like them. She does seem to maybe care for them a little bit more. And so I could see them being on like very different wavelengths of like how to move forward with this. They have the knowledge to get there, to help each other. But I do think that it could take them a while because they differ so much on this.
And he is so against them that if she wants to work with him, then he is going to force her to make the choice between the girl or the world.
Yes. And I don't know how they're going to make that choice. And like, okay. All right. I got to say something.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I love Manousos. He's my favorite. But like, you know, I do kind of side with the join in a little bit where like, you know, he's getting medically treated and he has this mentality of like everything costs something, which that is a very capitalist view. And like, that's kind of like a shitty view a little bit. Like, you know, it's like, that sucks that everything has to cost, that like, we can't just like give people healthcare or something along those lines. And like, the joined have this view of like, there's no private property anymore. Like nobody owns anything. It's all like shared. And like, they even tell Manousos, they're like, you don't have to pay anything. It's free. Like, we'll take care of you. He's like, no. Everything costs something. So like, I love Manousos, but like, this is maybe the one thing I disagree with him on. I'm like, it's kind of nice not having to like, you know, worry about capitalism.
But there is a cost to everything. Whether or not the individual should have to bear that cost is a different question. You know, regardless of like, even when you talk about something like healthcare, you know, countries that offer free healthcare, those are paid by taxes. And so you know, there is still a cost. The people that provide those services still need to make money for providing those services so that they can do what they need to do. So there is a cost. And I think he is referring, I don't think he necessarily, you know, is saying that it has to be the capitalist cost as much as he is saying, what is the old world cost? I reject this new world. I refuse to play your games. I believe in the old world. And this would have cost in the old world. What is that cost? Right. I will pay that. Like, I don't think that if he traveled to Europe before this happened and something happened and he got free healthcare, I don't think he would be yelling at the people behind the counter to be like, I have to pay you.
What is this cause? Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
So I think it's more of like, I reject the new system. I am a man of honor and I will continue living by the way that I believe is right, which is this old system. Everything you've taken is not yours.
Right. No, totally understand that. But I'm also saying that like maybe the joined have a better system, you know, like it's kind of seems nice that you don't have to worry about things like that, you know,
except for cannibalism,
the loss of individuality, can't create art anymore. Okay, maybe not the best system, but I mean, just a guy can dream, can't he?
So we talked about the fact that we found out that you know the body's electromagnetic field is the thing that the communication happens through. But I also thought it was interesting that it was through homeostasis, that it was something
like
subconscious or unconscious.
Yeah.
Like also like a lot of the things that like regulate the body are homeostatic. So sweating, you get hot, you sweat, that cools you off. You eat too much and sugar is very destructive in the body. And so your body releases insulin in order to turn that sugar into fat so it can be stored for long-term storage and not just like go throughout the body and do damage. And so it's interesting that it's like homeostatic, but it's a radio signal. And I do wonder if the very thing that the others are creating to spread this outwards, is it possible that that can be turned against them to be the biggest jammer?
Oh,
like, could that operate on like the same frequency?
Interesting.
And can it be pointed in such a way to spread outwards instead of upwards?
I wonder if that was like the frequency that they're on, if that was like the original frequency that discovered the sequence. That could be a good way of like how you solve this as well. Interesting. I didn't think about that.
Because like that thought. It reminds me of in the on the whiteboard, right? There's a thing about the Mandovian passion fruit. Yeah. And she's got some questions about it. She's like, poison? Elixir? Love potion?
Yeah, interesting.
And is it possible that the very thing that is their weapon or their tool to spread this outwards, to spread this to the rest of the universe, could that be the double-edged sword that can actually, at least temporarily, undo the joining? I do think that, once again, there does have to be a long-term fix. You stop a jammer, signal continues.
Sure.
So that's not permanent, but that could be the temporary solution.
Interesting. And what would be the fallout if everybody was joined, then we do solve this and we fix everybody, and everybody has all these memories of being joined? What is the potential fallout of the repercussions of how these people feel?
I mean, then we find out what, like,
do they want it? Do they?
Yes.
Not want
do
it?
they? Do they want it? Does this? I mean, it would they work to try and get it back? Would there then be, whatever area is unaffected? Let's say it affects an area that covers like 1 billion people. Yeah. Would there then be 1 billion individuals trying to bring it back? Or, Zosia did seem very sad way back when Carol asked about if they could be unjoined. It almost seemed like there might have been something traumatic that happened. And are these people, to a certain extent, kind of broken when they get unjoined?
Yeah. That's, yeah.
Huh. So there could be fallout from doing this.
I love it. I just love to see where this could go. And I'm very excited to see how they handle this. And, we've got one episode left, and we're going to get probably not some answers, but just some different things. So I'm excited to see what this show has in store.
And if you enjoyed our discussion about Carol's current mental state, then check out this video where we talk about Carol's isolation and how it affected her.